Welcome to my next video. In this video, I'm going to take a break from the translating that I've done in past videos in order to introduce and kind of review a book which I just found. So in addition to translating, I've also given information in my previous videos about why modern Greek pronunciation for Koine makes sense and why connecting modern Greek to Koine is important. The reason that I'm so excited about this book, which I'll tell you about in just a second, is that it backs up my informed intuitions about modern Greek and Koine. So, and also it's all in one place, so it's not all these different little bits of sources that I've given you in the past. So here's the book. The book is titled Reading and Pronouncing Biblical Greek, Historical Pronunciation, and by that he means modern Greek pronunciation, versus Erasmian. And the author is Philemon Zachariou. If you can see that. There we go. I'm going to give you the biography from the back here, his biography. Philemon Zachariou is New Testament Greek instructor for Bible Mesh Institute and instructor of English at Northwest University. He is the author of The Proselytizer, The Diaries of Panos T. Zachariou, Pioneer Minister of the Gospel in Greece, 1999. Philemon graduated from high school in Greece and from a Bible school in England and holds a BA and MA in linguistics, as does yours truly. And he also holds a PhD in religious education. During most of his career as an educator and public school administrator, he taught, among other college subjects, Modern Greek and New Testament Greek at various schools and colleges. I hope you caught from that introduction that the author of this book is actually Greek. And so this book basically gives research supporting what anyone who knows modern Greek and then starts to read Koine will tell you, and that is that you can see a clear continuation of Koine into modern Greek. The author of this book does not actually use the term modern Greek. He doesn't like it, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the term he uses is Neo-Hellenic to refer to the historical pronunciation of Greek. So during this video, I'm going to give you some quotes from the book and then some of my comments about them. So the first quote here is from page 9. Quote, "It is clear among professionals today that Neo-Hellenic is part of the living stream of the New Testament Koine." End quote. And by Neo-Hellenic here, he means what other people would call modern Greek. His focus in the book is on phonology and not on grammar and syntax, but he does, however, quote a scholar, also on page 9, saying, quote, "Various points of grammar and syntax are made clearer in the light of today's Greek vernacular," end quote. So basically he's saying if you know modern Greek, that's going to help you understand the grammar and syntax of Koine. In discussions about modern Greek pronunciation versus Erasmian for biblical Greek, sometimes you'll hear people say things like, well, just look at modern English and Old English, they're so different. That must mean that Greek is the same way. As a linguist, knowing the history of these two languages, I must say that that's a bogus argument, because the influences on the development of English are not the same as the influences, or lack of them, on the development of Greek. And in this book, the author, Zachariou, goes into detail on just this particular topic, among many others. So to quote the book, this quote is from the bottom of page 10. Quote, "Largely as a result of Alexander's conquests, the Hellenic dialects, under the predominance of Attic, were fused into a common tongue. So radical was the unification of these dialects that, in direct contrast to the fate of other Indo-European dialects, particularly the Germanic and Romance groups, which grew farther and farther apart, they have survived merged into one language whose continuity over the centuries, down to Neo-Hellenic, has curbed change to glacial slowness." End quote. So a couple comments here. He's saying as a result of Alexander's conquests, which were about 300 BC, so before Christ, the Hellenic dialects were merged into one, and this is in contrast to other Indo-European languages. And he says that, of course, Germanic is one of these, and I'll just add that English is one of the Germanic languages. And so he says at the very, very end that this one language, that is Greek, has been continuous over centuries, and the change in this one language has occurred with glacial slowness. As I mentioned earlier, the main focus of the book, as the title indicates, is on the pronunciation of Greek, of Biblical Greek. And to just give you the punchline, the phonological punchline up front, his point here in the book is that using modern Greek pronunciation is totally justified and appropriate. And I will just add that it is justified and appropriate in a scientific sense, in an artistic sense, and I would also say in a theological sense. So it's scientific in that it reflects linguistic scholarship. It's artistic in that it replaces the discordant sounds of Erasmian pronunciation with a genuine voice. And I would argue that it's also theological in that God loves specificity. We can see this in many ways. One of them is that he created different races and also different languages. There is a beauty in the authentic sounds of a language, in their created identity. This video may be a little bit scattered, so I'll just say right now, generally, when I'm speaking, unless I indicate otherwise, what I say here is backed up in this book. Back to the nature of Koine and Neo-Hellenic or Modern Greek. Koine is the continuation of Attic vernacular. Attic is one of several dialects of ancient Greek. Homer wrote in Ionic and Aeolic dialects, not Attic dialect. And Sophocles, Plato, Aristotle, and others wrote in literary classical Attic, not the Demotic or common Attic that Koine comes from. That's just a bit on the historical roots of Koine. Essentially, Koine is the continuation of a single dialect of Greek, which is Attic. And now back to the phonology, which again is the main point of the book. This quote is from page 18. Quote, "English-speaking students of New Testament and Classical Greek are typically told that in Neo-Hellenic, or modern, the E sound is represented 6 different ways. E, 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 E. And that this modern, in quotes, Greek method of pronouncing these letters in digraphs began to develop around medieval times. This method, students are further told, could not have been true of classical Greek, as there was no reason for the Athenians, a people of the subtlest intellect, to have assigned the same phonetic value to such a variety of symbols. As it will be shown, however, this variety of spellings for the same sound, that of iota, is not a modern invention, but rather the result of a centuries-old linguistic progression that reached classical Athens, end quote. And there's also a little amusing footnote here, right after he talks about how the Athenians are so subtly intellect, and they had all these different symbols, so they must have meant different sounds, or represented different sounds. The footnote here reads, notably, English E sounds are spelled 30 different ways, and he gives more information on that later in the book. The book goes on to show that there is a lot of manuscript evidence of different types, personal letters, shopping lists, business contracts, wills, etc. These are manuscripts, the Koine manuscripts, that have alternate spellings that confirm that the 6 different symbols were all pronounced the same, that is, E. And he does this. This is also done many other places. For example, Horrocks, the book by Horrocks that I've referenced before, called Greek, A History of the Language and Its Speakers, also gives these manuscript examples. So I'm just going to give you a few here just so you can get the idea of what the process is, but there are many more examples. The first example here is the word anavenis, which indicates that iota was pronounced the same as epsilon iota. The next example is pumenon, and this one shows that epsilon was pronounced the same as omicron iota. There are many more in the book, and you can find them other places as well. The book has lots more information on vowels, and it includes information on the pronunciation, the shift in pronunciation of epsilon from a front rounded vowel, that is U, to just a regular front high vowel E. So I talked about that earlier in one of my videos, that the only difference between those two pronunciations is that your lips are rounded in one and not rounded in the other. So E is just E with your lips rounded, and he talks about that. I'm not going to talk about it here. This next quote from the book is from page 66 on into page 67. Quote, "Scholars unfamiliar with the historical development of the Greek pronunciation seem to be under the impression that the Greek language evolved in the same general way as the Germanic and Romance dialects, measuring, in other words, presumed changes simply by the yardstick of time. Fee and Strauss, for instance, claim, quote, for contemporary Israelis and Greeks, reading the Bible in their original languages is like our reading the English of its earliest writers, such as the 14th century Chaucer. We recognize many of the words, but many we do not, and the grammar is especially strange to our ears." End internal quote. And then Zachariou continues, "It is not just words and grammar these scholars are alluding to, but also to pronunciation, since the difference between Chaucer and modern English unquestionably entails both. In any case, their claim is not valid as far as Greek is concerned. Compare their claim with another scholar's view, a view that bears repetition." And then he quotes Browning. And this is Browning's quote. "Ancient Greek is not a foreign language to the Greek of today as Anglo-Saxon is to the modern Englishman. Perhaps connected with this continuous identity over some 3.5 millennia is the slowness of change in Greek. Earlier stages of the language are thus accessible to speakers of later stages, a peculiar situation created by a long and continuous literary tradition, which makes all elements of Greek from antiquity to the present day, in a sense, accessible and present to any literate Greek." End quote from Browning. Then he talks a bit about Homeric words, which I'm not going to read here because we're not really concerned with that, and continues on to talk about words in Koine in the New Testament. So this is from Zachariou's book, quote, "Of the 4,900 words in the New Testament, not counting inflected forms, which would bring the total to a much higher figure, over 92% are either spoken or understood well today. Thus, the average Greek person today can read and understand many parts of the original Greek New Testament, e.g., nearly all parts of the Gospels, John and Revelation, most of Acts, Paul's writings, Peter, James, and Jude, and much of Hebrews, while only well-educated Greeks can understand the more literary parts in Hebrews, Paul's epistles, Acts, Peter, James, and Jude. The degree of comprehension depending on one's educational, occupational, and intellectual levels, as well as exposure to and familiarity with the New Testament scriptures." End quote. And I'll just say right there, that has to do, his understanding he's talking about there is not just pronunciation. He's talking about, like, the whole kit and caboodle. He's talking about, you could understand it in its entirety as a language. And the book, again, arguments in the book are just phonological, the main arguments. Okay, back to that quote. I'm going to continue just a little bit. Quote, "But beyond this fact being how modern Greeks could understand the New Testament, the eyebrow-raising truth is that today a Greek person reading out aloud orthophonically," that just means correct pronunciation, "a part of the original Greek New Testament would have been understood by its author, and Aristotle's writings by Aristotle himself, all because of the tenacious, diachronically recognizable historical Greek sounds and the support they get from an equally tenacious historical alphabet and consistent post-Euclidean orthography." Orthography is writing. End quote. Another quote from the bottom of page 67 on into page 68, quote, "Whereas English underwent profound pronunciation changes over the last 500 years, the pronunciation of Greek during the same period has remained unchanged. This tenaciousness of the Greek pronunciation system speaks as well of the tenaciousness of the historical Greek pronunciation 500 years before the fall of Constantinople, the millennium before then, and the 3 pre-Christian Hellenistic centuries leading back to Alexander and Aristotle's day. As Brown points out, quote, "Our much vaunted Erasmian, or so-called ancient, pronunciation of Greek is partly to blame for the misconception that modern Greek is entirely different from ancient Greek. Modern Greek is closer to ancient Greek than in any other modern language to an ancient predecessor of even a few centuries." End of Brown's quote and end of the larger quote. So let me just emphasize the last little bit there. He's saying that modern Greek is closer to ancient Greek, 3,500 years before it, than any other modern language is to just a few hundred years prior in its history. Zachariou goes on to say that the term modern Greek pronunciation is a misnomer, since it implies a recently developed pronunciation. Rather, the phonemic sounds of Greek are historical and ancient, essentially unchanged since 600 BC. And if you're not a linguist, a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a given language that distinguishes meaning in a word. I was going to go elaborate that a bit, but this video is getting too long, so there it is, the definition of a phoneme. The book gives some testimonies of people who have been using modern Greek or Neo-Hellenic pronunciation in reading the New Testament, and I'm just going to read one of them here. Just a warning, it's a pretty strongly worded one. It's on page 71 in the book. Here's why I find Phil Zachariou's work on the historical Greek pronunciation so important. When you read an ancient text in the mnemonic style of an author writing for an oral audience, and you do so in the pronunciation peculiar to the time, you can actually find yourself in the head of that author. I first felt this years ago while reading Paul's love song in 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 13. This cannot happen if you voice it in your head, in a phonemic scheme invented as a joke on Erasmus by Henricus, which has become a joke on Greek scholarship for over 480 years. Zachariou is not just teaching Greek phonology, he is introducing students to Paul of Tarsus, Mark, Luke, John of Ephesus, some for the first time. And that's a testimonial from Jack Kilman, Houston, Texas. Another topic in the book is how Erasmian pronunciation got started and how it got a strong hold in the academic community. I was going to read a lot of quotes. I'm just going to read a few and then try and kind of paraphrase the rest. So this first quote here is from page 76. Quote, "In 1528, Erasmus, at the suggestion of the illustrious Swiss scholar Henricus Galerianus, and eager to be credited with a novelty, published a work titled De Recta Latini Graecicae Sermonis Pronunciatione Dialogus, Basel, Switzerland, a literary squib in the form of a dialogue between a lion and a bear. Erasmus's satire introduced a customized non-Byzantine pronunciation of ancient Greek. Though allegedly Erasmus himself did not use the pronunciation named after him, nor did he propound its application. Ironically, he continued the Byzantine pronunciation to the end of his life. That would be the Neo-Hellenic or modern pronunciation. However, his publication, used by future scholars as the authority for linguistic innovation, tied a deviant academic knot around the pronunciation of Greek, inadvertently creating a problem that has been knotty ever since." End quote. Zachariou talks about a lot of political, cultural, and historical reasons why Erasmian pronunciation took hold, and you can read the book to get those. I'm just going to give one more short quote here from page 77. "The heroic struggle of the Greeks to throw off the Turkish yoke, 1821-27, rekindled scholarly interest in the Greek language. But by then the Erasmian pronunciation was deeply ingrained into the European academic fiber. Besides, a circumstance favorable to the growth of the Erasmian pronunciation was that it agreed very much with the sound system of German. So Erasmian ultimately became widely accepted, Germanized among the Germans. And that's the end of that quote. So in summary, and this is from page 83 of the book, Erasmus's unprecedented pronunciation of Greek was founded on a mix of ignorance and circumstance. There is a lot more in the book on Erasmian pronunciation, but here's one little tidbit that I think is particularly interesting. Modern renditions of the Erasmian vowel system have 10 distinct vowel sounds and 8 more diphthongs, for a total of 18 vowel sounds. So that's a lot. It's a lot of different vowel sounds. And this is really weird when you look at Mycenaean Greek, which is from 1500 to 1200 BC, and you see that at that time, 1500 to 1200 BC, Greek only had 5 vowel sounds. And interestingly, today, 3,500 years later, modern Greek or Neo-Hellenic Greek has the same 5 vowel sounds, which are I, E, A, O, U. Isn't it weird that if you accept Erasmian pronunciation for a short period in time, you go back to having 18 vowel sounds, which are suspiciously similar to English vowel sounds, and then you go back to the same 5 that were there before the 18. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And finally, a little bit about how the Erasmian mindset has an effect on the actual understanding of New Testament texts. For example, the Erasmian paradigm looks at meanings of words relative to their meanings in ancient Greek, ignoring the meanings in modern Greek, which meanings developed out of Koine. So basically it's a lopsided view. They're connecting Koine to ancient, but they're not connecting it to modern. Also, in terms of meaning, and this is a quote from the book, but he's quoting Hasselbrook in this bit here, a number of terms strongly associated with Christianity occur for the first time in the New Testament and continue on into modern Greek usage with the same meanings. Furthermore, the nature of this connection is such that the New Testament contains many features that have more affinity with modern than classical Greek. Therefore, a unity exists between the New Testament and modern Greek that should not be ignored or left unexplored. That seems like a good place to leave this video. I am going to continue on in my next videos with translating the Greek in the New Testament and with making comparisons of modern Greek to Koine. And by the way, I'll probably keep saying modern Greek instead of Neo-Hellenic. I am obviously not a native Greek speaker, but I'm hoping in the process of my learning alongside of you, my progress and understanding can be of benefit to you. I also hope that this video has been an encouragement to you to keep on learning modern Greek alongside of Koine in order to understand Koine better, out of love for the language, and in order to get the gospel deeper into your hearts.